So I know this video is sounding pretty crazy considering it is currently only, I think, 8 days until the end of March. And here I am releasing a video themed all around what I watched in February. And that's because the creative mind in me is like, hey, do this thing. It's a really cool idea. And then it's like, oh, should you do that? It's like this constant toss up that happens. But welcome to what I watched in my collection in February. So, just a heads up for those watching, this is going to be a little bit more of a kind of long form series. As you can see behind me, if you've been a fan of the channel, we have over 1,100 movies in the collection. And every month I try my best to watch as many as possible. Of course, with streaming and all the new stuff coming out and, work and life stuff, it does get kind of a little bit hard to focus in and just watch a bunch of stuff from the collection, but I'm really trying better. And in the month of February, I didn't really watch that many movies, but 10 of what I watched came from the collection. So what this series is really going to be is kind of me not super deep diving into these titles, but just kind of talking about them, having some thoughts. If you're a fan of the longer form stuff, please hang out. Comment below what your favorite was in the stack that we watched. And if you're not, I'll catch you on the next haul video. So I'm just going to dive right in. And like I said, I didn't watch too much in February. Not too much. I watched a little bit, right? But I kicked off the month with an Arrow title directed by J.P. Simon, and that was Slugs. And this was one that Erica had picked up for me. It was one that was kind of on my wish list for a long while. And I had never seen it, and I had a ton of fun with this one. Just a whole bunch of fun. It's actually funny because I really compared it to Alligator, which I had only watched weeks before this. And I'm watching this and I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of similarities, except Alligator, Slugs. But there's really not a ton of redeeming qualities to this outside of the incredible makeup effects. If you're a fan of gooey, disgusting practical effects, then this is kind of like a wet dream, which good for me, I am. But I had a ton of fun with it. I know this is getting a 4K, and I think from Arrow. But there's this really cool kind of inside artwork in this and a couple bonus features. I think it was, Carlo De Marchese, I think is how you say it. The interview with the special effects artist. So Slugs was the first movie that I actually picked up and watched in the month of February. And what a way to kick it off with a movie like that, right? So, for those who don't know, I am not the, not the biggest fan of found footage. It's just really not my thing. Even though I am a big fan of Blair Witch, big fan of the Paranormal Activity series, found footage is not a genre that I am appealed to in many ways. I do think it's sort of drawn out. Everything's kind of been done. Every now and then you have a very rare exception that comes along and does it a little bit different, right? But there's not too much reinventing the wheel when it comes to found footage. And I bought 2 movies for Erica to add to the collection that are found footage that she loved, both of which I had never seen before. So the first one was a first time watch for me. And we watched these on a Saturday night, and that was As Above, So Below. And funny story, I actually have memories of the trailer for this, more particular the scene where they come around the corner and the car is on fire. And I remember thinking, like, damn, that's freaky. That's crazy imagery right there. And so I went into this movie really only knowing that scene, and I have to say I enjoyed this much more than I thought I was going to. And there's a couple things about it that really helped it. First of all, it's going to be the settings. It does take place in the catacombs under Paris, and according to the making of featurette on here, it was actually filmed down in those catacombs. It makes for a really eerie setting. Even the kind of sets that they built inside of it including a pile of bones that all the characters had to crawl across. It was all really freaky, and I think that's what helped the movie the most. Actually filming down there, it gives this really, really, really eerie atmosphere, and especially when you go into it knowing that they did that, which of course I didn't beforehand, but afterwards I was thinking about it, and I'm like, can you imagine like working as a crew on, I don't know, however many days they shot this, and pretty much spending 10-12 hours a day down in these actual catacombs shooting this movie about the terror that's happening inside of the catacombs. But also one thing I loved is sort of the upside down world that happens as they get deeper. Eventually they kind of start moving up, so they go down so deep that everything they went through, they start coming through again, but they're coming up through it. And they're in this sort of like upside down parallel world. And I thought that was extremely interesting. There was a couple of really good scares in there, as well as, I have to say, the sound design. You know, when you're down in those places, a lot of echoes. There could be noise from anywhere, every direction. And the film really plays into that heavily, which I think makes it work much, much, much more than your average found footage film. And still, I think that with all these, the first half is sort of whatever. You know, it's kind of them getting to the point of things. The second act starts to pick up a little bit, and then the third act goes full nuts, and that's when it becomes the best, I think. But other than that, I think there were a lot of redeeming qualities to the Gallows that I liked. Or not the Gallows, wow, thinking of one movie ahead. To As Above, So Below that I liked enough to say that I was actually surprised by a found footage film I hadn't seen before. But yeah, As Above, So Below, we checked this out. Erica was super happy to add this to the collection, so this was the second watch of February. So the second part of that little haul that I bought that we watched right after As Above, So Below was The Gallows. And this kind of supported my reasoning for not loving the found footage genre as much. Couple redeeming qualities. First of all, there's a character in here who's absolutely ridiculous. All of his lines were pretty much great. He was the main humor, and for the first half of the movie, I had a lot of fun just listening to him kind of go off on his friends and kind of be the jerk off friend of the group. And another thing I really liked was the setting of inside of a school at night with nobody there. I remember a couple times, because of football, staying after school, and my school was huge, and kind of walking around gives this really eerie feeling. And I think it's because it's so you're so used to it being extremely crowded, and then it's quiet, and there's hallways heading in all directions and all kinds of stuff. And I think that The Gallows does lean on that pretty well, especially in the auditorium, on the stage. There's a couple of scenes in a staircase that are effective, but the movie more so tends to, setting-wise, bring you into like these weird corridors that were kind of built in the school and stuff, as opposed to really taking advantage of the setting. I like the idea here, the idea of this kid who was hanged during a school play, and now he kind of haunts the school as the hangman, but it doesn't lean into it enough or do anything remotely creative outside of that. I think that the cover scene was actually the most visually appealing, which is this girl in the hallway, and it's all red. And I don't really even remember too much of it, because to me it was pretty much wholly unforgettable outside of the setting and stuff, which is a shame, because like I said, I love the concept. I just feel like they didn't lean into it a lot. This was directed by Chris Loafing and Travis Clough, and I know that there is now a Gallows Act 2. I think it came out a couple years ago, and the completionist in me was like, oh, we need that, and Erica was like, trust me, we don't need that. So I guess she's kind of helping us dodge a bullet with the Gallows Act 2, but I am happy to have this in the collection, because I would like to kind of build up some more lost, or not lost, found footage films. And it's a film that Erica actually enjoys. So, we have it for her. It's our collection. So this one's for her. And I think there was a pretty good little gap between the Gallows and really when I started watching a couple more movies. I think work was kind of really kicking my butt in the month of February. And the next watch was... let me just get into it. So it was Len Wiseman's remake of Total Recall. And I know a lot of people are like, why do you even have this in the collection? For a couple reasons. I am a fan of Len Wiseman mostly as a director. I had a ton of fun with Live Free or Die Hard. I think that he is a competent filmmaker who is really good at filming action, especially like the action scenes in Live Free or Die Hard were some of the best that the franchise had in a little bit. I think it brought some new life that unfortunately was ruined in A Good Day to Die Hard. But I ended up getting this at a local store for a couple bucks, $3 or so. And this is the extended cut, which is, I think, 12 minutes longer than the theatrical cut. And while I am a fan of the original Arnie Total Recall, I think that this remake kind of... It bloats the story so much, and it relies so heavily on just front to back action. I mean, the movie beginning to end is crazy action, and the world, when you have a setting and an atmosphere that is futuristic, you have just unlimited creativity to create it whichever way you want. And it's just sort of your average dystopian future on display here. There was nothing that was crazy interesting about it, nothing that I felt like made it unique compared to, the countless other films that, are exactly like this or kind of have the same plot as this. I felt like it didn't really... It was just kind of taking Total Recall, these very small similarities, and cramming them into this, hey, we need a plot around these really cool action scene ideas that we have. And honestly, it's very rare that you're going to hear me say this, but it gets kind of exhausting. You get about halfway through here and you're just like, okay, I know where this is going to go. Like, I can see all of this happening. I already know which direction it's going to go. It is cool to see Kate Beckinsale in a kick-ass role. Colin Farrell is Colin Farrell. Jessica Biel is also great in this, so the cast is fine. But the whole... It just doesn't have the magic of Paul Verhoeven's original film. It doesn't have Arnold. It's really lacking a bunch of imagination. It's more so just taking kind of some royalties with how creative the team of the original was, and that doesn't really equal a good modern day action film, which I actually think you can take Total Recall and sort of reconstruct it and make a really, really, really good remake with. This one just really wasn't it. And as far as just lumping it in a category of a modern day action movie, it's just okay. Ton of CGI, all your typical stuff. But yeah, I watched Total Recall for whatever reason. I don't know if this is going to be staying in the collection. We'll see as the time goes on if this remains. So I use the CLZ Movies app to not only catalog all of my movies, but when I don't have a particular title to watch, I will do the random, which you just shake the app and it picks a random movie out of your collection to watch. And was super happy that it landed on Thor Ragnarok. Now, I just want to say, I think Marvel has these crazy peaks and valleys, right? The Infinity War saga was the most consistent. I mean, and since then, Marvel has been, a mixed bag. I, for the most part, enjoy what they've been doing, but everybody's pretty much aware that they are struggling to kind of recapture the magic of what the Infinity War saga did. And I think that Marvel has a couple perfect films, right? So, it's Captain America Civil War. I love that movie. I think the Russo brothers directed the hell out of that. It's Thor Ragnarok. And then I lumped them as one movie. It's Infinity War and Endgame. And I think that those are prime examples of where the MCU absolutely crushed the goal. Thor Ragnarok, this was the addition of Taika Waititi into the MCU, and it just like brought new life into Thor in a way that I never really imagined it. I know Thor as a character, the potential was there, and the first Thor and the Dark World kind of like very lightly showed us who he was as a character, meaning like his humor or the ability to play with the setting and the world building and all of that stuff. And it wasn't until Ragnarok that it all came together perfectly, and then it all fell apart again in Love and Thunder. But Thor Ragnarok is an absolute blast. There's nothing that I can say about it that you don't already know. When the movie needs to be serious, it gets really serious, and when it needs to be funny and lighthearted, of course, my favorite being the addition of Jeff Goldblum. I think that he was incredible. I love the plot line with the Hulk. I think all of that is great. The addition of Tessa Thompson was fantastic. I absolutely love Kate Blanchett as our villain in this story. And I think that for Marvel, in a lean 130 minutes, this is the most fun I've had with a Marvel movie in a long time. In a really long time. Here's my thing, right? It's really confusing what happened between Ragnarok and Love and Thunder, and maybe it was just too much Taika Waititi. I think he needs to be restrained a little bit when it comes to property work, which is why I'm always like on the fence with him doing a Star Wars movie. But in my opinion, Thor Ragnarok is perfection in the MCU. It's also perfection as Taika Waititi as a director. I absolutely love this movie, and I was really happy when this came up in the CLZ random pick. So this one was really cool to watch this again. I hadn't seen it since it was in theaters, and I had been kind of thinking on it. I was like, man, I really need to give that another watch. And I did a review for this next movie that I watched on the channel, so I'm not going to go too crazy, but Spielberg's The Fable Men. I did miss this in theaters, but I adore this movie. Spielberg is my favorite director, and this is very loosely based on his upbringing. And if you're a fan of film and cinema, this is kind of the perfect movie for you. I absolutely love, coming from not a perfect family. I really related to a lot of aspects of this movie. Also, as somebody who has used film as a bit of an escape from the real world, I think that's where this really hit me the most. And I do think Spielberg's career led up to this. Like, he had to make this movie, and I'm happy that he finally got the chance to, because I think in years from now, when we reflect on his career as a filmmaker, this is going to stand as an absolute staple in that reflection. So The Fablemans, I was very happy to finally own that and get a chance to watch that. So I grew up into cars, right? Maybe a lot of you did as well. And the Bible films for a car fan when I was growing up were The Fast and the Furious. Obviously, I mean, I'm still going to the theaters within the first 2 days to see those goddamn movies. And the other one was Gone in 60 Seconds, and this was another CLZ random pick. And I don't care how corny people think this movie is, I love it. And not just because of the nostalgia factor, right? You have Nicolas Cage pretty much in his prime at this time. This was let me see if I can remember. I can't remember what year this came out. But it's pretty much his prime. And There was a lot about this that still I watch and I enjoy, right? It is that relationship between Nick Cage and Angelina Jolie. There is a rock star cast of supporting actors in here, people that you will recognize. Maybe they didn't go on to have gigantic careers outside of who was it? Robert Duvall. I don't know how I blanked on his name. And Nicolas Cage and Jolie, but the supporting cast is great. Eleanor, who is the Mustang in this film, is my favorite car of all time. I hope to one day actually own that car. I don't know if I will, but I hope to one day. And honestly, the thing I like about this movie is for a film about a bunch of car thieves, it stays pretty grounded, and it's really not afraid to be ridiculous. There is a scene where dog eats a bunch of keys, and they have to follow him around so that way he can poop out the keys. And then right before he does, get rid of the keys, a bunch of gang members randomly show up and start interrogating the two guys with the dog. And it's crazy. There's another random gang that pops up and goes after Kip all the time, and they just kind of randomly show up. And it's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in this movie, and it all leads up to the iconic jump on the bridge where somehow Nicolas Cage, who plays Kip in this film, takes Eleanor and jumps it over an entire accident on a bridge. The bridge is closed down at a certain point, and he jumps a tow truck and floats through the air. And it's ridiculous enough in this movie that you're okay with it. So it really makes, I think, Gone in 60 Seconds a gem in the history of car films. There's a really cool dock chase where a wrecking ball just comes through and bashes, I'm pretty sure it was a Ford Explorer cop car. There's a ton of crazy stuff that happens in this movie, and yet it doesn't feel extremely over the top. And I know that's kind of confusing to hear, but as I was watching it, I was like, man, I just have so much fun with this that I didn't pick up on before. And when I was done watching, I was like, I could just throw this on again if I want. I almost was tempted to just a couple of days later just throw it on again, have it in the background, and occasionally pay attention. So this month I reintroduced myself to my love for Gone in 60 Seconds. So I feel like now I need to revisit Fast and the Furious just to kind of feel some type of way. Just to go back to my youth, I guess. So, on my day off, it was a Tuesday. I was kind of looking at the collection. I'm thinking, like, man, what do I want to watch? And I was just in the mood for a comedy. And it ended up turning into a double feature of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. So, kind of a bit of a hot take. Kevin Smith, I love him as a director. I actually think his two best movies, of course, this is my opinion, are Dogma and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. So throwing this on was just like, I was having an absolute blast. I love what he's done in the View Askew universe with Jay and Silent Bob. They just kind of are always randomly popping up, and the fact that they have their own movie, it was great. I love Ben Affleck popping up. I like the whole plot of just them trying to get to Hollywood to invade and stop the production of the Blunt Man and Chronic movie. And you got all these crazy jokes about Miramax, and there's just so much happening in this movie. And Kevin Smith is such a witty writer. Maybe not the most mature of writers, but his humor is second to none. You know when you're watching a Kevin Smith film. And I just always have a ton of fun with it. And then following it up with the reboot actually made the reboot better. I had seen it a couple of times before, but following it up directly with Strike Back made it better. And it's not as funny. It's a different kind of humor. I mean, the world that Strike Back was made in is no longer existing. That world of comedy doesn't exist anymore. And Reboot very clearly demonstrates that in the type of humor. I mean, you still have Jay and Silent Bob just being Jay and Silent Bob, right? But the world has changed, therefore the humor has changed. Kevin Smith as a writer has changed, and honestly, the characters have changed. I think for the better. It made the emotional punch of Reboot much more prominent than it did when I watched Reboot, and it had been years since I had seen Strike Back. So this was a double feature that was very, very, very needed. Needed for me, and I was happy to, to finally watch both of these. I'm really happy to have these as well. And only one left from the month of February. I've already watched almost double this many in March, and we still have I don't know, what did I say, 8 days left or something. And my final watch for the month was Richard Donner's Lethal Weapon 4. Now, I love all 4 of these movies. I think Lethal Weapon is the best. Lethal Weapon 2 is just as good. Lethal Weapon 3 took a little bit of a dip for me, and then Lethal Weapon 4 kind of comes right back up. And a lot of that is because, Donner, an incredible action director, but it was really cool to see Donald Glover and Mel Gibson back again. The whole, buddy cop genre was kind of dying out when this kind of came back. I can't remember what year this came out. I think 98, the late 90s. But to have Chris Rock in here, you have Gene Russo, Joe Pesci is back. I mean, there's just a ton of fun to be had with this. And Donner was a very, 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 very witty director, meaning he knew action films had changed since the original batch of Lethal Weapon movies, and therefore you can see the change in scale with Lethal Weapon 4. I mean, the opening scene is Donald Glover and Mel Gibson rolling up to a man in full armor with a flamethrower, and Mel Gibson makes Donald Glover strip down to his underwear, and then he shoots the release valve on the propane tank, which throws him forward into a gas station. There's this huge explosion. I mean, it is peak craziness in the first 10 minutes of this movie. And then it really gets into the plot, and you're introduced to Jet Li and everything kind of going on in this criminal underworld, your typical Lethal Weapon stuff. And I actually think this is one of the rare times where the ending action scene is not as big as the opening, and I'm 100% perfectly okay with that. Now, I will say I do think some of the writing didn't really stand the test of time, more so the attitude towards cultures, as you know. I mean, it's not the first time that we've seen Riggs and Murtaugh be a little bit, insensitive towards other cultures, but it does kind of go a little bit overboard in a couple scenes. And me personally, I just laughed about it, but I sat down and I was like, man, that's kind of, I don't think that's going to age too well. But perfectly fine. Outside of that, shouldn't even brought that up. Outside of that, I think Lethal Weapon 4 is a perfect way to end this. I'm one of those people who I'm sort of in on the side of Mel Gibson of coming back with a fifth one. Richard Donner unfortunately passed away not too long ago, and I think Mel Gibson sort of on a journey to, in his honor, make another movie with Donald Glover, another Lethal Weapon. And in a way, I'm on the side of that because I would love to see it again. But I do think Donner, as a director, did something with these that I don't think another director is really going to be able to do. I mean, really, I would just be leaning on the Riggs Murtaugh, Gibson Glover relationship there, back and forth hecticness to really, that's been alive in the 4 of these films that makes the 4 of these films so special. So I'm sort of on that side, but I'm also kind of I'm perfectly fine just leaving it at this. But so absolutely love this movie. I think Jet Li was a great addition to it as well. He makes a very compelling villain. And yeah, it's still, your typical Lethal Weapon. It's funny, full of action. I had a ton of fun with it, and that was my final watch of February. So yeah, sort of a light month for me as far as movie watching goes, but already in March I've blown that out of the water, and I can't wait to sit down and record that video. And let me know down below if you're a fan of this style of videos. I know people love hauls and stuff, but this is something that I think over time I kind of want to slow down with and really focus on not reviewing the movies as much, but more so just kind of open discussion about what I've watched from the collection. Because in all of this, there are movies that I love and there are movies that I've never seen, and movies that I'm, wishy-washy on every single time I watch them. I have a slightly different opinion or view. Also, let me know, too, what you think of the new background. It's still evolving. I have some lights and stuff to kind of add and some things to add. This is also the first video with the new microphone. Trying slowly to improve the experience of this channel as much as I can. So do me a favor, give this a thumbs up, leave a comment down below. I absolutely love talking movies. I really want to continue building a community out of this channel, one where we can just all talk about movies and be supported. And please, let's continue supporting physical media, continue supporting all the incredible creators that are not only on here but on Instagram as well and other platforms, just talking movies, talking physical media. So yeah, let me know down below what you thought of this video. Shoot me a follow over on my Instagram. It is the same name as on here. It's Bearded Film Guy. And I'll see you all in the next video.